Hello everyone, my name is Roya, and today I'm going to be telling you about the 8 books that I read in the first half of the month. So the first one that I read was Thomas Wildis and the Book of Sorrows by J.M. Bergen. This was sent to me by the fabulous people over at Book Publicity Services, so thank you so much for sending this my way. So this is a middle grade book about a kid named Thomas, obviously, who discovers that he has magical abilities that are pretty generic, that are basically stuff like being able to teleport things to different places, etc., etc. And overall, this isn't a bad book. It has a lot of potential, certainly, and especially for a middle grade audience. So I was a little bit generous in my rating of giving it 3 stars because I do think that a lot of the things that bothered me about it that I thought could have been a lot better may not be your typical middle grade reader's thing that they find fault with. So, but overall, I felt like this book was not bad, but the first half was really boring and it took forever to actually get to the plot because it was literally just about him getting up, going to school, like, etc., just normal things for like the first half of the book. And then it got into the good stuff halfway through, and then there was just some other weird plot points that made no sense and some plot holes and stuff that, like, the way that people did things just really was unrealistic with what they were trying to do. The characters were pretty flat. People of color in this, but they were all pretty stereotypical. A lot of, like, his the main character's best friend is a Latinx boy, and then there are other people of color in this as well, and a lot of the stereotypes that are in this are actually things that kind of went over my head. I just noticed, like, the occasional little thing, but I went on Goodreads to see if anyone else had noticed the same things, and that was the case. I did see a few other reviews on there that I noticed that they noticed so many other things than what I did. But what got me mostly is the fact that there's a Chinese character speaking really broken English, and the way that it's worded is like nobody who doesn't speak English well talks like that. So it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, and I do have a full review going up of this book very soon, so you can look forward to that. Blood and Sand by C.V. Weick. This is a Spartacus retelling in which Spartacus is a woman, which is pretty clever because Spartacus is a historical figure that we surprisingly know nothing about. We know that he's from Thrace, but we have no idea who he was or anything, really. So he could easily have been a woman and nobody would have known. So this is a pretty good concept, and I did enjoy this a little bit, but overall I thought it was kind of meh. Plot didn't really progress at all throughout the entire book. There wasn't really anything that our main characters were trying to do or accomplish in any way. So yeah, we have characters in a sucky situation because their whole families have been killed and they're slaves now, blah blah blah. But like, they're not trying to escape and keep people from finding out. They're not trying to find out anything. Like, nothing really happens in this book. Like, there's no actual conflict going on. So I was very bored while reading it, despite it being an interesting and well-researched book. So overall, I mean, this was actually a highly anticipated release of mine from the year that it came out, and I just never actually got around to it. And so it's kind of a letdown that I thought this book was just okay. Then I read the 4 books that are out so far in the Wayward Children series by Shannon McGuire. This is the first one, If Your Heart a Doorway, and it's probably my favorite one. So this whole series has to do with basically kids who have gone to other worlds, come back, and have to deal with the real world now. So it is a really interesting concept, and I found myself really enjoying these books. I always kind of thought that this was a really hyped series, so I wasn't I wasn't really that interested in it just because it's so hyped these days, but I finally just decided to read it, and I loved it. So the first one's probably my favorite because it's introducing, like, it follows someone who just came back from being in a different world and just like what she has to do now. And then the second one is probably my next favorite because it's a prequel about a couple of the characters from the first book who and kind of how they how they went to their own magical world and whatnot. So, and what's interesting about that one is that they're twin girls, and their parents just kind of decided that like one should be the girly one and one should be the tomboy one. So they just raised them that way, just automatically, like giving pretty dresses to one of them and then having the other one like go and play sports and stuff like that. And they didn't like that at all. They didn't feel like it never occurred to their parents that they might, be actual people with actual opinions about what they like and don't like and blah blah blah. So that was really interesting, and all the stuff that happens to them in that book as well. But overall, this whole series is really, really good. I also read Rise by Ellen Goodlett. This is the sequel to Rule, and basically I wasn't really that interested in reading this sequel because the first one was kind of enough for me. So I initially was really interested in the first one last year just because it's essentially a Three Dark Crowns ripoff, whether that's intentional on the author's part or not. Basically, these days a lot of publishers are, a lot of books are getting published these days that are a little bit like Three Dark Crowns, in which like people are competing or fighting to the death or whatever over like a throne, blah blah blah. So that's essentially what this is about. It's not a fight to the death or anything, but it is a competition between three sisters who are trying to each become queen, etc., etc. So once I had already read the first one and had already been introduced to this world and these characters, nothing was really compelling me to read the second one, so I wasn't really that interested in it. But the audiobook was available from the library, so I decided to check it out, and it was really good. I still really liked it. I am not a fan of the surprise villain trope that keeps showing up in YA all the time, and it is driving me nuts. I just don't like that trope anymore. Oh my gods. But essentially it was still a really good read, all of that, and the magic system did get really cool, and I do think this series is really entertaining, but it is a little bit on the generic side. It's not as good as something like Three Dark Crowns. It's very like just there to kind of be a cool book, I guess, but there's nothing like profound. You're not really missing anything by not reading it. Finally, I did have a DNF this month already, and that is A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. This was actually a physical arc that I got at Y'all West, so I felt really bad for DNFing it 2/3 in, but I have since passed that arc on to somebody else who would probably enjoy it more than me. So I was really bummed that I didn't like this because, again, like I just said, I really enjoy things that are trying to rip off of Three Dark Crowns, just not for any particular purpose, but just because I like that type of story. I like fights to the death. I like things like the Hunger Games, and I also like just stuff that's a competition between siblings in general. So I was really interested in this book, but it really was so boring. I was bored out of my mind, and after 2/3 of this book, I could not take it anymore. It was actually making me not want to read anything anymore, and that just sucked. So I just couldn't read anymore. So essentially, this book is really trying to be like Three Dark Crowns, in that like basically two sisters have to fight, and basically that decides which one is queen because the other one dies. So basically we follow one of them, and it's her first person point of view. And what didn't work about this is that there's no reason for them to fight at all. They could literally just find any other way to choose which one should be queen, like whether it's pick the oldest or have their parents pick. It really doesn't matter. And so there's nothing keeping her there. There's nothing making her fight her sister like she doesn't want to, or anything like that at all. It's just a tradition they have. Whereas if you've read Three Dark Crowns, you will know that there are actual magical forces in place making the three sisters fight each other, and also what they're fighting over is just a little bit more time to be alive, because they know that, of course, whichever one does become queen only gets to live for like another year or two, and then she dies too. So really they're not fighting over anything. So that's all the stuff that I thought worked really well about Three Dark Crowns that fell super flat in this, because all that stuff, like any reason for any of the plot at all, just was not there. And then also the fact that we don't know why either of them wants to be queen even. Like, there's no reason, there's nothing making us think, oh, the sister is going to do such horrible things for the kingdom, so of course the main character should win. Nothing like that at all. There was nothing making me give a rat's ass about which one wins and which one gets to run the kingdom at all. I just flat did not care. So unfortunately that led me to DNF that book, and I was so bummed. I thought I was gonna love it. So unfortunately, yeah, I hope if you're anticipating this book, or if you've read this book or are reading this book before it comes out, I hope that you enjoy it more than I did, because I just did not like it at all. So anyway, those are the books that I read in the first half of July. Let me know if you have read any of these, have any thoughts on them, and what your favorite book of the month so far is, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!